You bet, Paula. Thank you very much. All right, there we go. Chapter 3, more about alcoholism.
Most of us has been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people or presently may be has to be smashed. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were gaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better.
Yeah, so we jump right in at the very beginning here, and we talk about the fact that we're unwilling to admit that we are real alcoholics. I think that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of effort on our parts individually to come to terms with it. And I think we basically come to terms with it in a private, kind of almost personal matter in the beginning before we're ever really willing to admit it. Not that people don't already know it, and we are kind of hopeful that somehow we are kind of getting in under the radar, if you will. But we don't like to think about our being bodily and mentally different, but yet we are. Being alcoholic is something that affects us both from the standpoint of our mental and then also our physical being. And we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but I just want to reinforce, can't overemphasize enough the fact that we are in fact different, and we have tried and tried and tried to be like normal people, and we have failed. Even though we've continued to try and convince ourselves that in some way, somehow, we're going to be able to control it. We are the lucky few that have been able to overcome that, and we'll get into that as we kind of go forward. Right now, we're really just talking about alcoholism as it is. But the first step in all of this is to fully concede in our innermost selves that we are, in fact, alcoholics. Now, it's important, not conceding or admitting to other people. I mean, that is a step that people take, and it certainly is something that we've all actually experienced, but that's not the goal of the first step. And the first step is really something that's very personal. It's very private. We've heard it described before that it's not necessarily a fun activity to do, but it is something that you've got to do in order to be able to get started with this program. And that is to just, again, I'll just use the words they use in the book, and that is to fully concede to our innermost selves that we are, in fact, alcoholic. Somehow that thinking that we are not has to literally be smashed. And I think it's been said, there's no better way to say that. We don't ever really recover. That's bottom line, as in the sense that we are always going to be alcoholic. We recover from alcoholism, but we don't really recover as alcoholics. And that's another thing that I think is important to be able to try and explain to people. And I have found that trying to explain that in terms of people, it's understandable. Most people are accepting of the idea that I will always be an alcoholic. I talk about it freely when it's necessary or when it's appropriate. I used to hide that fact, but now have become very comfortable with the fact that in most cases, people are, well, in fact, in my situation, in all cases, people have been very, very accepting of my admission that I am alcoholic, as far as that's considered. And this is something that we never actually get better at. And I think that the last thing that we'll make a point of, and I'll just emphasize, is that the older we get, the worse we get. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Rob?
Beautiful, Leo. First step, a lot of people around us know that we have a drinking problem, but we don't admit it to ourselves. And we go on many, many years trying to prove that we can control and enjoy our drinking. And then we finally, until we admit to our innermost selves that we have a drinking problem, we'll never get cured. Remember, we're never cured. We recover. We are never cured of alcoholism. We will always have the allergy that never goes away. But depending upon our spiritual connection, we are recovered. So let's continue on. We're at the bottom of page 30, everybody. We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there have been brief recovery, followed always by a still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet.
Yep. And in the words of our close friend Gary, it's once a pickle, always a pickle. Just
Good
bring
point.
that up because I think that that's a great way to kind of summarize this particular paragraph here. There have been all kinds of remedies tried and they just don't happen. And the relapses are absolutely still worse and worse and worse. And so far, science has not come up with remedies that actually cures us of being alcoholics. Now, there are medications out there that either one, make it so that we are don't want to drink, and it makes you nauseous if you do. There's other ones that actually are out there that will lessen the effects of alcohol and or will lessen the desire, but none of those actually keep you from drinking. And so we're still out there searching for something from a science standpoint. Rob?
Excellent, Leo. Everybody who just came in, we're on the top of page 31, the first paragraph. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they're in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people.
Yeah, and this is just a reinforcement with regard to they just it's again, you've got to admit to your innermost self that you are alcoholic, and the fight is rather intense with regard to not doing that. There are really no exceptions to that rule, and then the fact is that we've tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people, and that is again just a reinforcement that we have gone down that path numerous times, convinced in the beginning that we're going to be able to drink like everybody else in the room, and all to find out that we're not. And I think it's described really nicely from the standpoint that the person prior to taking that first drink is one kind of person. The person afterwards is chemically altered and is a completely different person at that point, and is now just the opposite, trying to convince themselves on how they're going to be able to drink more and still be able to maintain some semblance of control. Rob?
Yeah, our disease tells us that we don't have a disease or an illness. Our brains keep telling us, "Oh, you're fine. You're making too hard of a situation. You know what? You can have a drink. Just go ahead, take that first drink." Then what happens? The big lie. The allergy kicks in, and we're off to the races. And I love the next paragraph where some of the things we have tried, because I know I've tried all of these things and never worked for me. Here are some of the methods we have tried: drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever, with and without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. We could increase the list ad infinitum.
Yeah, and there's really not much more to say to that other than the fact that I know that each of us can probably come up with a half a dozen other things that we've actually tried to remedy our alcoholism and somehow be able to control it and drink like other people. So great beginning list of that. And like I said, we could probably add 2 or 3 more paragraphs worth of stuff in here and still not cover all of the things that everybody has tried in order to stop drinking. So we'll just leave it at that, Rob.
Yeah, drinking only when you had a good day, drinking only when you had a bad day, drinking when things were going great, drinking when things were going bad. You know, as I say, we drink. Give me any excuse and I'll drink. We do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try to stop, try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take you long for you to decide if you are honest with yourself about it. It may be worth a bad case of jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition.
Yeah, this is a test that it's actually called the Marty Mann test. And there is a story basically on page 200 that kind of talks about this, but that's really what this is the kind of trying to try some controlled drinking and saying that you're going to drink only 3 drinks and stop, or 4 drinks and stop, something like that, and finding yourself reasoning or unreasonably reasoning your way into more drinks. But nonetheless, that's what this is called. Rob?
Though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time. We have heard of a few instances where people who show definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here is one.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I think bottom line is that all of us at certain times have been able to achieve a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, etc. I think that there's an element there with there being still choices. There are still options available to the alcoholic. I think that there needs to be, and this is Leo talking, that there has to be some level of desperation at that point in time where you make that final decision that you're going to give yourself over to this higher power. You finally have, in fact, admitted to your innermost self that you are alcoholic and that you are that you need to find that inner strength. And I think that that's you're in that place where you're going to find that inner strength to begin your journey as a recovering alcoholic. But this is at that point that I think that I know I was there. I kept thinking that I am creating options for myself. I wasn't at a point where I was about to lose everything until I was. And once I got to that point and I looked around and I was completely defeated by alcohol, and realizing that another drink was going to cause me a great amount of discourse, was I able to finally admit that I was beat and that I needed to do something different. And at that point is when I finally found that inner strength to begin my journey as a recovering alcoholic. We're going to talk a little bit about somebody else at this point.
Yes, we are. We're going to talk about a man of 30. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was nervous in the morning after these bouts and quiet himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatsoever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Then he fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. Every means of solving his problem, which money could buy, was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. For a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years.
Yeah, this is really one of those cases where it's interesting that a person of this caliber was able to actually stop for the amount of time that they were able to stop. And then once they started, found themselves unable to stop, and in fact, quickly found themselves getting worse, and within about 4 years was dead. This, I believe, would be one of those kind of outlier cases. Most of us that are drinkers probably don't last decades without drinking and then turn around and start drinking again. Some of us haven't even gotten to that point yet, although a few of us in this room have gotten there, I being one of them. But the idea here is that once they started, they jumped right back in, essentially where they left off, except that they had advanced in their alcoholism at that point and found themselves unable to deal with it in an appropriate manner in whatsoever. And in this case, it was an extreme case, because going from 0 to dead in 4 years is quite a journey. Rob?
Yeah, the big lie is that not drinking for a few weeks, a few months, a few years, we're able to drink like regular people. You know, our brains, as I said earlier, tell us it's going to be fine. Go ahead, take that first drink. You'll be fine. The allergy never goes away. We are always allergic to it. And the adage is that as our bodies get older, our metabolism slows down. It's harder for us to break down the alcohol, which makes it even that much worse. And I remember something. This man retired at 55, and in 4 years he was dead. He was 59 years of age. He was a young man. He had a lot more to give and to enjoy in this life. It's sad, but people die of alcoholism. I'm sure we've all got friends or acquaintances that we know of people that have died of this disease. It's so sad when it doesn't have to happen. That's why we have to carry this message. This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could therefore drink normally. But here's a man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in a short time as bad as ever. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol.
Yeah, that last sentence is incredibly important here. Not any less important than the sentence that's right in the middle there, and that's once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, and that's just the fact of life. But the planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. And I think that there at the beginning is that some way we believe that, and we think that, and then we find ourselves trying it again after a period of time and finding that we're actually worse, not better. Is time and again proof over and over again that this last sentence is absolutely true, and it is for all of us. There is no exceptions to this. But I'll say it once again: once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. You're going to be as bad as ever if you go back to drinking. And I know in myself there was I'll even use the lurking notion that somehow I was going to be able to drink normally, or I could just take one drink and be fine. And I did find myself doing that after a period of what I would consider as a relatively long period of not drinking. And I found that that was not the case. What I did learn, and I'll just admit this right up front, is that the alcohol didn't taste near as good, which I thought was, well, it really surprised me. And it's something that had reinforced for me that I was no longer going to be a drinker, even though I was desiring alcohol. Rob?
That makes me think of the song that guilty feet have no rhythm, guilty taste buds have no taste. You know, it just ruins it for us.
That's a good thing to say there. You're absolutely right, Rob.
You know, because the remorse and the guilt and the shame that we feel, you know,
Oh, yeah.
we don't want to be doing it, but we do it no matter what. It's our brains, you know, telling us, oh, it's going to taste so good. Or, you know, the malady of the mind. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop, as he did, on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can do it, because none will really want to stop, and hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find he can win out. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, have been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking 20 years.
Yeah, and I think too is that I think a lot of us that have been drinking for 20 years have probably been able to admit that when we were less than 30, we were out of control with our drinking. We just didn't admit it. Second thing is that this is one of those groups of people that I find that are very, very distraught with finding out that they are now at a point where they have lost control of their drinking. And yet they look around and they're 28 or 24 or 35, something to that effect. And they're thinking to themselves, I have to stop drinking now. I have most of my life left. And now all of a sudden, I'm not going to be able to drink. And I say that to say that I have had that experience with young people struggling mightily with trying to come to terms with their own alcoholism and the fact that they could not control their drinking. I know that when I was in my 40s, was jealous of men that were in their 70s and even 80s, where they had 10 or 15 or 20 years of sobriety, which was very admirable and great. And I was glad to see that they were sober, and it was something to aspire to. But the problem is that they didn't stop until they were 60 or 65 years old. And I thought to myself, I'm only in my 40s and I'm going to miss out on 20 years of drinking that these men had. The problem is I wasn't ready to admit the fact that some of these men actually had things like car accidents where they were lifted out by helicopter to go to a hospital to save their lives. And I had been fortunate and lucky enough that none of that had ever happened to me. And yet some of these men had stopped drinking because of some drastic, very, very bad thing that had happened because of their drinking in their lives. And they were just lucky to be alive in the first place. So a lot of things that were I struggled with early on when I was trying to stop drinking earlier in my life, and yet again, just like this said, I kept thinking that I had options, and so therefore I kept struggling with this, trying to drink like other people. I think that when you grab a young person that has already experienced alcoholism and is already really in the grips of being alcoholic, that it's an important place to try to encourage them to really dig deep and realize that they are probably going to have a much better life without alcohol than they are having had the alcohol and drinking for as many years as some of us were, I'll just say, lucky that we didn't have something bad, really, really bad happen to us, and we were fortunate that we survived, kind of thing. You just never know. But I know for a fact now, as a recovered alcoholic, that it would have been nice if I would have been able to stop some 10, 20 years earlier, and maybe had experienced the potential of some even better times, as well as some probable better health benefits as well. But it is a struggle to work with a young person and really get them to be convinced of the fact that them getting control of their lives in this regard is much, much better than waiting until they're 60 or 65. Rob?
We've romanticized liquor, and we make it seem like, oh, we're going to miss this, we're going to miss that. I'll be honest with you, I do not miss it. When people talk about giving up liquor, it's all in the brain. It's telling us that, oh, I'm going to miss out on my friends, the jolly good times, the times that I can be with my friends and we just sit back and have a great time. You can still have a great time. Liquor does not make times better. It's the people you're around and how you appreciate the people that are around you. We can do it sober. I promise you that. So, stop romanticizing liquor. Okay. We've been taught that, and it is a lie. Life is great without liquor. We can spend time with people. I can spend time with my cousins, my friends, my brother. They drink. They can drink normally. Good for them. My hats are off to them. I can't. I had to concede to my innermost selves that I can't drink. Why? Because I have the allergy. And once I take any liquor into my body, I cannot control the amounts. Therefore, I can't drink. That doesn't mean I can't have a good time. That doesn't mean I can't laugh, that I can't enjoy people being around me. I do. And it's a great life. So please stop romanticizing alcohol. To be
Damn it.
To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time or take the quantities some of us have. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. Certain drinkers, who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics, are astonished at their inability to stop. We who are familiar with the symptoms see large number of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere, but try and get them to see it. As we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. If anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. If he is a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant chance of success. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remain sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks.
Yeah, it's just too powerful to be able to resist under your own self-will and self-power. That's just really the bottom line as to what they're trying to say right here. Couple of things with regard to what Rob has just read. This is the only reference to anything being a year in length with regard to AA. So anytime somebody tells you that you should wait a year, you should do a year, you should do X, Y, or Z, that is not necessarily anything to do with AA. This is the only, like I said, reference to anything being a year. And I think it's important to note that you just don't have to drink for a long time. It's not necessarily a disease that takes 40 or more years in order to progress to a point that you've lost control. Most of us, and I can tell you to a person, I was in an organization that encouraged drinking, and it was masked by the fact that it was woven into the fabric of that organization that drinking hard was a prerequisite / requirement / badge of honor. And what we basically did is we had a lot of hard drinkers mixed in with a lot of alcoholics, basically drinking and using each other as something to hide behind. Long ago, I can remember times when I can pinpoint that I had lost control of my ability to control my drinking, and I was in my 20s at that point. So I was an alcoholic decades before I was ready to admit it. So, Rob?
Yeah, as we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. Who else tried to quit on their own willpower? Roland Hazard, Bill W. They tried to quit on their own willpower. Remember, Bill came out of treatment. He knew self-knowledge would keep him sober this time. Within a short period of time, he was back drinking. Willpower doesn't. We have gone beyond that point. And we have to come to a realization on our own that we passed that point. When I crossed that invisible line, I don't know. I can't tell you that. But I went on many years trying to prove to myself that I could quit on my own. And I failed miserably until I was able to come into the rooms, learn the program of action, and take on a higher power. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We're assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Many of us felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish.
The utter inability to leave it alone, no matter what. This is an excellent section, and it's meant for this very thing, and that is for somebody that is not educated on alcoholism to be able to get into this chapter, read about it, and be able to understand it better. And I can't emphasize enough how important this is as a sponsor, working with somebody that is still not sure what alcoholism is, whether they're young or old. This is a great guide to assist a sponsor with their sponsee, or a sponsor with a newcomer, or just somebody that's asking the question, which I did in a snide kind of smart aleck kind of way. When I would go into a meeting, I would ask them, well, how do you know you're an alcoholic, and so what is alcoholism, and that type of thing. Nobody ever pointed me to the book, nobody ever, and let alone to this chapter, but I've been through it enough times now that I can tell you that when you've got somebody that is questioning alcoholism and whether or not they are alcoholic, this is a great thing to walk through alongside somebody that is a newcomer to AA and do and really get them to understand it. And there is this other part here. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Again, that is a very personal and private thing. It's not me admitting to Rob that I am willing and ready to stop drinking. It is to myself. It is a very, very private and very honest place to be. And I think that that is an important point to make. A lot of people I've seen, somebody very close in my life included, that just thought, they just got excited and everything was great because they had admitted that they were alcoholic, and that they were, admitting that they desired to stop. And so they had quote done step one, and were moving through everything. And I didn't bust their bubble, but I wasn't, as exuberant and excited with them, because I had been there myself and know that that's not what we're talking about. We are literally talking about a one-person thing, and that is for you to sit down and very, very privately, very personally, and with the most honesty that you've ever mustered up in any of your in any part of your life, and that is to admit to yourself that you are alcoholic and that you truly, really do desire to stop drinking. It's such an important thing to be at that point. Otherwise, you're just fooling yourself, and ultimately you're fooling others, which again isn't the important thing here. Rob?
Yeah, remember that the fellowship, a lot of people that are there are there for other people. Their spouse has said, I think you might have a drinking problem. I think, you need some help. So they come to the fellowship. Some people are court mandated to come. They don't want to be there. They don't want to give up drinking yet. And we learn more as we go in through the book, how to proceed with these people. So I'll save that fun stuff for later on. But Not everybody that is in a fellowship wants to quit drinking. They just want people to get off their back. The frothy emotional appeal. Why don't you give it up for her? Why don't you give it up for him? Geographical cures, this and that. Not, as I say, not everybody wants to give up the drink yet. So, but we do. We plant the seed, which we will find out later on in the book. How then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem.
Yeah, we'll just keep going, Rob.
Okay.
This is
What sort of
good
thinking
info.
dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? What is he thinking?
Yeah, so we're basically going to talk about the kind of things that are going to, just give you an example of what it's like to sit there and think that, I don't know, I'm not willing to admit that I'm alcoholic. I'm on the verge of losing everything or major things in my life, and yet here I am drinking again, and it is a struggle. It is one of those things that we grapple with mightily in regards to that, and ultimately we're just mystified as to why we ended up finding ourselves drinking again when failure and the loss is so apparent and right at our feet. Rob?
Yeah, we're really getting into the malady of the mind right now. We know we have the allergy. Okay, the doctor's opinion talked about the allergy, the phenomena of craving. We take one drink into our system and we can't stop. So why is it now we're getting into, why is it that I take that first drink when I know that is what is going to happen? Why? So they talk about here, a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking. The most important, the puzzling part of it. Why do I take that first drink? What sort of thinking is dominating me? And this is the beauty of Bill's writing, how he explains everything to us in simple terms. He hasn't said before that we are crazy, but when we really think about it, we're not all there, because we know what's going to happen. Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. I love these stories. I love these when they talk about certain people and they give up beautiful examples. And this is another one of them. Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He is an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us.
Yeah, we're actually talking about a man by the name of Ralph Furlong. This is in fact somewhat of a true story here with in Bill putting this together. But they are describing a lot of us in that the fact that we are successful in other areas of our life, whether that be from a career standpoint, a family standpoint, some type of altruistic way. We've been very well thought of, very well looked upon, respected, etc. And for some reason, we have control of that portion of our lives, but all to find out that we are not as in control of that as we would like, and we've let alcohol enter our lives. And either one, we've been drinking all along, and the progression of the disease finally starts to become apparent, and or in this case, which is interesting, that they didn't start drinking until they were 35 years old, find that they were never really able to control it, and it wasn't long before it actually had control of them. Remember, we don't have it, it has us. Rob?
So true, Leo. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in a serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had deep affection.
Yeah, I kind of call this the beginning here where he's made a beginning. His family is reassembled and he began to work as a salesman for the business and he had lost through drinking. And then he failed to enlarge his spiritual life and found himself drunk half a dozen times. We can call that the AA waltz, if you will, just as an aside here, where you've basically got things falling down around your feet, and yet you find yourself drinking for a period of time, stopping for a period of time, trying to reassemble things, getting things back together, hopeful that this is the time. Your family is in this kind of yo-yo or roller coaster ride, if you will, kind of place, and yet here you go again with another debacle and another drink. It's kind of a, 1, 2, 3 drink, 1, 2, 3 drink, if you will. It's unfortunate, but many of us, if not all of us, have been there.
1,
Rob?
2, 3, cha cha cha. The thing is that he did part of it. And this is, as Leo said, a lot of us go through the fellowship and we see the same thing happen to an awful lot of people. If it hasn't happened to us, is where we start feeling better and we think we're okay now. And we're not. Also, another important point to put out here is that he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him. They didn't give up on him. Okay? Alcoholism is a disease that, we get drunk. They didn't give up on him. They kept working with him, trying to help him out. If your sponsee is willing, we're there to help. Yet he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they had a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I had been going to it for years. I'd eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart, but felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another.
Here we go. And that is the insanity of our drinking. And that is the malady of the mind, that inability to have the defense against that first drink, having this reasoning, unreasonable reasoning with yourself that in some manner or fashion, that even on a full stomach, you would be able to drink and have no effect. And the fact is you are going to have the effect. Now, it's an important thing here. He had no intention to drink. I can tell you that my scenario for this was when I was out mowing the yard. I pulled a lawnmower out, found a bottle of alcohol that I had hidden, and unfortunately, I mowed the lawn. The entire time I was obsessed with the bottle of alcohol, and sure enough, instead of going down the right path and doing the right thing, I ultimately chose to drink, and there again started off another debacle. In this case, I also want to point out that full stomach or not, alcohol has the same effect on you. So don't be fooled by that. Same thing holds true with drinking coffee after the fact. All you basically do is become a wide awake drunk. as far as that's concerned. So the physiological parts of drinking are still there no matter what. And there you are suddenly in the midst and in the grips of alcohol and drinking. Rob?
Yeah, this man was not, he showed up to work on a Tuesday. It doesn't mean that he didn't show up for work on Monday and that's why they had the talk. He might have worked on the weekend. So we don't assume that he didn't show up for work and that's why he had words with the boss. He started work on a Tuesday, had some words with the boss, not a big deal. He says this in the story. Okay. Right now we're looking at the mental states that precede the first drink. He had no thought. He had gone to this place many, many times, so it's not a big deal. But suddenly thought it'd be a good idea if he poured whiskey into its milk, which to me sounds disgusting, terrible. I don't know how anybody can do it, but it just shows how crazy, and the things that our brain will come up with to make us think that, it'll be fine this time. So on page 35, it said, so we shall describe some of the mental states that precede us taking that first drink. And here's one of them, which to me sounds so crazy. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic. Yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else?
Yeah, plain insanity. The knowledge does not fix me. Just because I'm knowledgeable of what alcoholism is, knowledgeable about the fact that I'm alcoholic, armed with all of that, sure, there is a level of confidence that comes with it, but it isn't the kind of inner strength that we're talking about with regard to being able to stop and stay stopped. And again, the reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside. We just figure out that we are somehow going to be able to control our drinking and drink like normal people. And that great obsession that we either overcome or we follow it into oblivion. But bottom line is, and this is the great two words, plain insanity. There's just no other way of looking at it, just plain insanity. And I think you can be that blunt with a newcomer, as somebody that's got the experience and the knowledge and taking them through this. I think that I've not only highlighted plain insanity, I've underlined it, and then at one point in time I've circled it as well. So it's really just one of the best descriptions here with regard to the malady.
Yeah.
Rob?
Yeah. You may think this is an extreme case. To us, it is not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always the curious mental phenomena, which parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. Next day, we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened.
Absolutely. And what we've just read from whatever the precise definition of the word may be, all the way through to right now, is a great definition for the malady. It just is, and really kind of talking about what it is when we talk about that insanity, that inability to have the defense against that first drink, and all of that mental twist and reasoning that goes on with regard to taking that first drink. Rob?
Yeah, as I say, Leo, this is all the mental part. It's all in our brain, the malady of the mind, as we call it here. How nothing seems to stop us from taking that first drink. Why do we continually do it? And these case studies that Bill puts in are a great reflection. You can see somebody that we can relate to and what they go through, putting an ounce of whiskey in their milk. Oh, I'm going to be fine. They know the consequences. Other people, they're in treatment 6 or 7 times, but they leave treatment center and they end up going and taking that drink, knowing that here we go again on the same roller coaster ride. Leo, it is 12:53. Would we like to bring Mr. Bill into it?
Yes, we would. Thank you very much.
You there, Bill? Oh. We might not have Mr. Bill today.
There we go.
Okay, there it is. I couldn't unmute for a minute. I was stuck on mute. Okay, hi, this is Bill S., alcoholic from New Jersey.
Hey, Bill.
Thanks a lot, guys. Good job on this chapter here. This chapter is probably most people's favorite chapter. I know a lot of people that I dealt with, they love this chapter because it's got a lot of real good information in it. And when we went through a lot of stuff here, there's really a lot of good information here. We started on page 30. It gives us the instructions for what this book tells us how to do step one. It says we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The book is telling us right here when we're at the first step. This is the first step. When you can concede to your innermost self that you're alcoholic, if you want to say you admit that you're powerless over alcohol, whatever wording you want to use, basically, you have to admit that alcohol has defeated you. And until you get to that point, you have not even started step one. Whether you want to go further with your sponsor or get more involved in it, that's what the book says. We have to admit we're powerless over alcohol, or we have to admit we're alcoholics. And then the third paragraph down on that page, it says it uses the word control 4 times. Bill's trying to tell us that we've lost control of our drinking. We can't control how much we drink. No matter what we do, no matter how we try, no matter how much willpower we try to use, and it says over any considerable period of time, we get worse, never better. Like Rob pointed out, as you get older and older and older, your metabolism slows down, and it's harder and harder to metabolize alcohol, so it has a stronger and stronger effect on you. No matter what you think, I didn't drink for a certain period of time, and I'll be able to drink again. Alcoholism just doesn't work like that. And and it tells us on page 31, it says, most alcoholics don't believe they're in that class. This is a disease of denial. We convince ourselves that there's nothing wrong with us. It's everybody else. I'm okay. I'm just going through a phase. I'm going to outgrow this. And then they're giving us some a test here that we can use. It's known as the Marty Mann test. You're supposed to take 2 drinks a day for like 6 months. And if you don't have any problem or any issue, then it's considered that you're probably not an alcoholic. Most of us, as soon as we have 2 drinks, we're going to be off to the races. And and what this is supposed to show you, this Marty Mann test, it's supposed to show you the phenomenon of cravings. Because according to Dr. Silkworth, we can't start drinking without developing the phenomenon of cravings if we're alcoholics. And that's basically what this test is supposed to show you. Then it talks about a man of 30 on page 32. And this guy went back. He was able to stop drinking for 25 years. And then he came to this idea, he had the belief, and it says that practically every alcoholic has, that a long period of sobriety and self-discipline qualifies us to drink like other men. That's known as the big lie. For some reason, most alcoholics believe if you don't drink for a long period of time, somehow alcoholism goes backwards. Alcoholism does not go away. It's not like having a sprained ankle and you stay off it for a couple of days and ice it, and then it goes back to normal, and then you can use it again like normal. Alcoholism doesn't work like that. Once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. Once you're a pickle, you're going to be a pickle. You can't be a cucumber again. Alcoholism just does not go backwards. Once you got it for the rest of your life. Nobody has ever come up with a way to reverse alcoholism. And well, what they're telling us here is that this book told us, again, I left this out on the previous page, we don't like to pronounce any individual an alcoholic. The reason they don't want to pronounce anybody an alcoholic, that's our job. We're supposed to determine whether or not we're alcoholics. This book can't tell me I'm an alcoholic. In order for me to do step one, I have to admit that I'm alcoholic, or I have to admit that I'm powerless over alcohol. This book can't do it for me. I have to do it myself. If I don't do it, I haven't done step one. So basically, that's what it's trying to tell us here. Then it goes in and it talks about this guy Jim, the car salesman, and they changed his name. His real name was Ralph, but they changed his name. And basically, what this guy did, what he went through was he went through steps 1, 2, and 3. It says we told him what we knew of alcoholism. They explained alcoholism to him. They walked him through step 1. And the answer we had found. The answer to being powerless is to find a power greater than yourself. And he made a beginning. That means he went and he did step 3. He did the first 3 steps. He started to get better, but that's not enough to keep you sober. You have to go through the rest of this process and do this whole program. It says, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. How do we enlarge our spiritual life? It told us on the bottom of page 14 and the top of page 15, through work and self